Thank you, Soren.
Yeah, thank you so much, Soren. We also would like to thank the ROM, Soren and Aaron, for facilitating this. We're really grateful, and it's an astounding turnout. We're thinking about doing stadiums next, but anyway, we wanted to start by talking about the question of commissioning artists, and this is a slide from the RFP that was that we responded to back in 2019. And it very explicitly names the subjects as artists, and it also says that the goal is for them to document and interpret. And that we've taken to heart all the way through the project. And we feel this is quite a visionary kind of endeavor on the part of Waterfront Toronto. It's very rare. So why artists? Artists Commission has a very different perspective and goals and results from what a commercial industrial photographer might do, which is essentially client-driven work. We were given a mandate, as I said, to document and interpret. We do historical research also to understand our subject matter before we shoot and as we shoot. The fact that it's a multi-year commission and we have an unusual amount of freedom of access to the site creates all kinds of possibilities, which we try to respond to. And in general, it's astoundingly unique. These kinds of commissions are very rare, and we'll come back to the question of the context of these commissions and their value at the end of our presentation. This speaks to how perhaps the third situation differs from that of perhaps an industrial photographer who is doing a site assignment. This is the meanderings that often happen as we are on the site. We happen to track ourselves with the GPS at times, and you can see that this is very exploratory. Let's put it that way. There have been other projects that other artists have done on the waterfront, perhaps not with the duration of the work that we've done right now, but certainly there's a lot of interest from many other artists and photographers. Hamish Buchanan, for example, did photography in the 80s of the old fuel tanks, which are all gone now if you go down to the site. And this is also Peter McCallum's work from the late 90s. He did some beautiful work of the demolition of the Milne's fuel tanks, which were, I think, the biggest tanks on the site. And then there's, of course, Bob Burley's work on the Leslie Spitt, the Tommy Thompson Park with Walter Kem, a fantastic book, highly recommended, really beautiful work by Bob, who has also done other work in the Don Valley. And lastly, not an artist necessarily, but an academic approach, we recommend, if you are really interested in the history of the Don and what preceded the Portlands project, Jennifer Bonnell's book. It's Reclaiming the Don.
In the flesh. There we go.
Yeah. Is this copy free for first?
Yeah, it's a prize, a door prize.
Yes, that's for interesting questions at the end. So we're going to do just a little bit of housekeeping to keep things moving along here. We'll kind of run you through the abstract of what we'll address today. First, we're going to start with the orientation of the site, getting a sense of its scale and a bit of the progress throughout the years through some panoramas. We'll then address 4 of our site-specific public installations that happened throughout the years through Contact Photography Festival. And then we'll address any of the additional themes that we had identified. There's many themes as photographers down on the site on a multi-year project that we've engaged with and identified. We're just going to focus on 2 big ones today. And then we'll discuss the larger questions about the value of commissioning artists and documentary photographers kind of working in this way that Vid and I work. So to begin, site overview. So this image here is from 2019, and as you can see, some of the machines on site are beginning to come into place. We use the panoramic view often as photographers. We're working in many different ways, but this is kind of our Vid and I stepping back to kind of really illustrate the sense of scale down on the site, it really at times is hard to communicate how large this site is. In this image here in 2020, lots of excavation has already happened up to this point, and you can kind of see, where's our, have the laser pointer there, Vid. We can kind of start to begin to see the boundaries of the future river valley on both, yeah, Vid's got it there, we go. And really this is kind of the foundation, laying the groundwork for the refinement of that river valley. And again, as photographers, we really saw the importance of the panorama. It translates okay here, but being able to zoom in 100% on an image that is 9 or 10 images stitched together in high detail, I think is really important. So this is from earlier this spring of 2023. And as the project began to progress and the river valley began to fill in, we began to witness scenes like this. In an image like this, we're seeing various stages of the project and the construction process playing out before our eyes. To the left, we have the greening of the site and the wetlands being maintained, while to the right of the frame of the image there, we have the continuous excavation work. We sometimes also employed aerial photography into the way of seeing and engaging and looking at the site. Again, the aerials help really illustrate and show the immense scale. In this case here, the shape of the bend in the future river. This one here, we see the establishing of one of the wetlands last fall. This is night work at the West Plug. And if you look in the image here to the kind of in the right portion there, I think Vid's got the laser pointer, we see a carp gate, and this is used to keep the invasive carp out of the river ecosystem from Lake Ontario. So just on the other side of that yellow bridge is Lake Ontario. There's a wall there that is retaining the lake. And this is a similar view. We're looking to the West Plug, where TNT Market and Cherry Street used to be. And this is where the river will meet Lake Ontario. So this is just before New Year's this year. So, with this commission, again, commission as artists, really our goal, from the outset was to document and interpret what was happening down on the site. And another big part of it was to communicate to the public what happened on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, and one of the other things I should say is that as we go through these slides, Ryan and I are not experts on every single industrial and process that you're going to see, an engineering process. We photograph what we see, and then we often are speaking to people and asking them, like, what work are you doing? What is this process? And we've learned a lot, but by no means are we experts. And towards the end of our presentation, there'll be an opportunity perhaps to talk to some of the people from Waterfront Toronto afterwards. So we want to go through our exhibitions at this point that we did. Every year we try to do a new exhibition based on a theme that we felt captured visually what we had seen on the site. And of course there are many different choices, but we had to come down to one. We worked with Chloe Catan on this, and Chloe was very persuasive and was able to, in the very beginning, we wanted to work site specifically on the site. We wanted to be able to actually put our photographs into the site itself, but in the public space of the site. And we were able to manage to get access to the silo door on Cherry Street, and also 5 billboards were magically appeared on Villiers Street, 12 by 8 feet, double-sided. So each year we had to reduce, I can't even count how many thousand photographs we took to 11 photographs.
The magnificent 11, yes.
You can just imagine.
And also, side note, these billboards did not magically appear. There was no fairy waving a wand, and they didn't appear. It was all thanks to Waterfront Toronto and Ellis Dawn. They gratefully donated their time and resources to help build that.
Yeah, and this is an example of the billboards. They can basically withstand a hurricane. They're fantastic construction. So the first theme was framework, and what we saw the first year, we started beginning of June, or end of June, sorry, 2019, and almost immediately numerous industrial buildings were taken down and demolished. And so what we started to do was go into the buildings before they disappeared, and we used to photograph. We photographed inside them, outside, all that. And so the exhibition came down to looking through the doors and windows of buildings that no longer exist at scenes that no longer exist either. So the framework was an opportunity to kind of see how the site was prepared for the river excavation.
And yeah, really kind of drawn to focusing on that disappearing post-industrial past, right?
Yeah. Well, closer? Yeah. And this image is interesting because this is 130 Commissioners, which was the Cooper's metal and recycling plant. And in this yard, what looks like soil is actually a very thick carpet of plastic, metal, and glass. And we decided to become amateur archaeologists, and we did a dig on the site, and we produced a piece for Contact Photography's website. You might still be able to find it, but we tried to find objects that piqued our curiosity, and they kind of reflect the sort of industrial history of southern Ontario, actually. And so this is a kind of another reason why it's interesting to have commissioned artists to do this. We were thinking about also working in other ways, installation and other modes.
So I will address some of the additional related work, things that were happening down on the site beyond what we had seen in framework. More demolition. Here we have the demolition of the last oil drums on Cherry Street. This was in 2020. So this was actually a couple years later. But what also happened in 2019 was United Rentals at 75 Commissioners.
We should point out that this is actually a Frank Gehry building.
Yes. Gehry inspired. We have York Environmental at 97 Commissioner Street, also demolished. And what was fascinating was when Vid and I started the project, we started in July of 2019, and a lot of these buildings were already, like, the week we started, these buildings started to become demolished and decommissioned, and we were really just had to capture all that we could of this disappearing industrial past. We're very much also, as photographers, we're not only interested in the large landscape, the epic, we're also interested in the everyday. And so this is from 130 Commissioners. This was actually the final punch card at 130 Commissioners, and it reads July, this is Datsao M, it reads July 31st, 7:13 a.m. to 5 p.m. Vacation paid, please. In handwriting. This is 130 Commissioners essentially being dismantled, and there's some drama when both of these sides came down. We also photographed TNT Supermarket. So, this was obviously a space that was more accessible to the public, a space that most folks are, more familiar with and known to the public. So photographing kind of the final days of TNT.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, we can hear the collective. We were actually quite upset as well, because logistically, there's not much else around there. So if you don't pack a lunch...
But TNT stood in the very pathway of the new river.
Yes.
So there's a sacrifice and there's a gain.
Yep, absolutely. So one of the buildings, there are several buildings that are still being retained on site as part of the project. We'll just address one right now, and this is the former fire hall, which was shuttered and moved back to accommodate for the new path of Commissioners Street. So they lifted it up and moved it back. Mm-hmm. Easy. See, we're not experts. As this was all happening, as the demolitions were happening, work and progress moving, kind of the prep work to build this future river valley was still happening. So, we saw, it was almost a year of this kind of scene down on the site. And for those like going through the site, looking over the hoardings, you probably saw this kind of makeshift temporary skyline appear.
We actually likened it to what it looks like driving up the 400 and looking at Canada's Wonderland. So the next exhibition following year in 2021, this is all happening during COVID, by the way, and that's another story. We won't get into it right away. But the next exhibition was called The Mobile Landscape. And again, based on what we had seen the previous year on site, and we decided to focus on the movement and the remediation of soil. And those are huge, huge efforts being made. Soil was moving around the site constantly. There were mountains that were there one week and gone the next. And also there was the incredibly difficult problem of cleaning soil for reuse. And I know, and the Waterfront Toronto folks can probably tell me if this is correct, but I believe they're trying to recycle like something like 80-90% of the soil on the site, which is actually quite a feat, and reuse it again, because there's landscaping happening for the park, the new park, and that sort of thing. So the soil that's being dug out of the ground is being reused and remediated as much as possible. And the remediation processes were twofold. One was to basically pile the soil in long rows and allow it to aerate, basically. And then there were also some ovens set up, I believe, which actually baked the soil over a long period of time. They were there on the site for only a year or so. I can't remember, but the efforts to try to reuse the soil were very impressive.
And yeah, I think visually the theme that we kind of connected here this year was really these piles. They're appearing, reappearing every few days. We go down to the site, and it felt like a completely different landscape, right? Thus the mobile landscape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we did one more additional installation that year, thanks to Waterfront Toronto's support. We were very interested in this particular moment that happened. There was a causeway that once connected what was called Fisherman's Island, which is now essentially where Cherry Beach is, to the mainland. Before Ashbridges Bay was filled in, that would have been water, and the causeway connected them. And the causeway was rediscovered, actually, in the fall, I believe, of 2020. And a long section of it, almost 200 or 300 meters, was retained for a few weeks while the archaeologists from TRCA came and studied it, and we photographed it. And then, unfortunately, it had to be bulldozed for the river. But we also were interested in the confluence of the causeway discovery and the artifacts which were found. There was also a dump of some sort found that was once used by Torontonians in the early or late 19th and early 20th centuries. And we found an enormous amount of objects were found, most of them not particularly valuable, but we gathered some of the more unusual objects. This is a child's dumbbell, by the way. Yes. And we took them to my studio and we rephotographed them, and we produced this installation along again on Cherry Street. So if you were going through as public, you could actually see what was going on the other side of the fence. And you could also see some of the objects, and Scott Eckford, the archaeologist, wrote some captions for us to explain what the objects were.
Yeah, and this was again the opportunity to be able to engage and show publicly down on the site was really incredible. Every opportunity we had to do that, we said yes, we took it. From the beginning in our RFP to respond to this proposal with Waterfront Toronto, we had built in the need to show the work publicly and engage with the public on the site, just on the other side of the fence. We love touring folks down there. Obviously, in the early days, COVID kind of played a negative role in that, but more recently we've been able to take folks down. And for anyone who has been down there on a tour or just down there, we're really just throwing you into it. The dust, the noise, it's at times inhospitable, but it really kind of puts the viewer in the shoes of those working down there. I'll very quickly go over some additional related work. So Vid spoke to the soil remediation. Again, it really felt like chaos down there, but these piles of soil were meticulously tracked and categorized.
Yeah, the alien landscape.
Yep, this is the other world we step into. The excavation process in 2020, Again, for those of you maybe passing through the site, there's sometimes some smells going on there for obvious reasons, dealing with that post-industrial landscape and the brownfield. And after excavation, you can actually see in this image in the kind of the far background. Yep, right there. Those are that's the river valley walls.
Cut-off walls.
Yep, the cutoff walls coming into view. And then in 2022, we looked at how to build a river. And essentially this chapter, we really saw the wetlands and the river begin to take shape. It was really exciting as photographers, and I think as anyone working on the project as well.
And if you go back a sec there, you can see how now the site is starting to envelop our installations as the pipes are surrounding our...
Yep, on Villiers Street, yep. So we have imaged kind of depicting the shaping of the land. Here we have a membrane liner to protect the future river valley from any post-industrial contaminants coming up from the ground. That's as technical as we're going to get here, folks. We also have a variety of materials coming in, which was, again, super exciting for us to see as photographers.
Yeah, those, by the way, are meant to produce habitat, as they'll rot in the water and produce habitat for fish and fauna.
Essentially, well, we're getting technical now, but essentially, it's essentially this is the bank of the river in one of the bends in the river, so it's a naturalized way of kind of constructing this bend. Every material was classified, as I mentioned, beyond soil. All the rocks, all of the different layers were classified and accounted for. We do have an image, not here, but we have an image of trees with barcodes on them.
Can we use the term FES lifts?
Yeah.
Those are planting.
This is the placing of the first tree in one of the many future wetlands on site. And then this image here is quite special and interesting, and some folks may be familiar with this story. This is the 100-year-old seed story. So excavation occurred on site. There was a period of time where that site was left untouched. That allowed for the right amount of sun, water, time, and these bulrushes had germinated. It was somewhat peculiar. Okay, what are these doing here? We didn't plant these. The bulrushes were taken and analyzed at a lab at U of T, and essentially they discovered that these were bulrushes from the original Ashbridges Bay that Soren had spoken about. So this was pre-1920. It's an incredible story. It's a time capsule of our history on the site that is, resurfaced, and it's here for us in the present. And after the analysis, there was a symbolic replanting with representatives from Indigenous communities bringing these plants back to the site. And some of the plants were also on Tommy Thompson Park.
And then the next exhibition, which is the current one that's still up right now, if you want to go down with your rubber boots on, is Greenwork. And that refers to the what essentially was the blossoming of the site. Like many of the earlier images, you see gray, brown soil moving around, but finally the planting started. And the plantings transformed the site incredibly, because what we saw was a movement also from massive amounts of machinery, big machines, small ant-sized people, to suddenly groups of individuals doing planting, doing all kinds of activities that are almost similar to tree planting or farming even. So we were really fascinated by this shift that we saw going on in the landscape or in the Portlands, and we focused on that for this exhibition, which is ending up to be our last one on site.
Yeah, and again, it was really fascinating. These chapters are happening and these themes are emerging for us visually as photographers, but there's this hand labor, there's this like human level of the project, but we still have in the peripheral the big machines happening because it's such a large project, right? So one area of the site will be kind of completed, that phase or stage, while the other is trying to catch up, right?
Yeah, it was a dramatic change.
Yeah. And
an enormous network of irrigation was also set up down there, temporary piping and everything, and these are all timed. Unfortunately, sometimes at the wrong time as we were walking through them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Luckily, we have waterproof cameras.
Yep. Your rain jackets.
Yeah. And there in the last shot, you actually see a good sense of what the river looks like now, just before the inundation starts, with the green banks, and then the finished bed of the river, the edges, everything is much as it looks like now.
Cool. I'm going to keep things moving. I don't know how we are for time, but yeah. So this year we're not planning. There is no plans for public exhibition this year in our current venue on Villiers Street. What has happened, essentially, our installation is now literally becoming an artifact and kind of part of the PLFP project as the construction begins to encroach on that space. And yeah, I think we find it quite humorous. You know, a project that started, we're trying to bring, you know, the site to the public. Now the site is really, it's temporarily becoming, the public space is temporarily becoming part of the site.
Well, it's actually the bike lane and the sidewalks are still accessible. It's the cars that are more inconvenient. So if you're interested in taking a beautiful walk in the Portlands, it's still up.
Yes, bring your PPE. So some additional themes. Again, these are just two additional themes. There are many that both Vid and I have explored and reflected on as photographers as we're kind of mining our archive of images after we shoot. Two that we're going to address is the return of original plants and animals, and then also the representation of labor.
Yeah, this more corresponds more or less to some of our thoughts about being included in a program that has to do with the wildlife photography exhibit, actually.
Yep, absolutely. So what was really interesting is on the site very early on, as the construction progress and process was happening, we began to kind of witness weeds and plants come back to the site. And as a result, we also saw a lot of bird life and wildlife come back to the site. We were super excited. We thought that was really fantastic. But some folks and those in the construction business, this posed a problem. They had to deal with, you know, nesting birds on piles and areas that needed to be excavated or worked on. You know, we're in a time, this is great, we're in a time where, you know, the construction projects are actually stopping work to, you know, allow these nesting birds to, you know, finish their work in that space. They're not just kind of pushing them out, so kind of respecting nature from that side of things. But as a result, to kind of deal with these nesting wildlife, a number of decoys were employed and utilized. So we have on the left here, a gentleman holding one of the owl decoys. These are a staple down on the site. They also brought in live falconry to scare off any nesting birds. We have the kite variety of decoys in the shape of a falcon here. And again, this is all to avoid the construction delays. We have the owl peering back. I believe this was on one of the bridges, perhaps Cherry Street Bridge. A number of streamers and various other shapes and forms of deterrents took place on these piles. And some even resembling that of a medieval fair. This image here, it's rather banal photograph. You know, however, what it represents and what it's photographing is essentially a cordoned off area. This is an example of when a nesting bird, and in this case it was a killdeer, was nesting in the river valley and on the riverbed. And essentially the construction crew had to cordon it off, and that area of the site could not be interacted with for a number of weeks until the killdeer moved on.
And it's impressive that the project was able to accommodate that. In fact,
you don't see that very often. No parking, bird nesting. No. And TNT. For those of you again, kind of going down to Cherry Beach a lot, you probably realize or notice, why is TNT just the front of TNT standing there for so long, but half the building's gone? Is this like an art installation? What's going on here? This is actually due to nesting swallows in the front facade. So there we go.
Yeah, this is the kind of wildlife, of course, that Torontonians are used to.
Coyotes down on the site.
One thing we should say here too, in relation to the way that we shot here. Maybe in comparison to how you sort of understand wildlife photography, which is usually close-ups of the animals, we were really interested in contextualizing the animals in the site so that you saw something like this, where you see the actual work going on, and then the goslings and the geese in the foreground. And so we're trying to always put the wildlife in the context of the site, so you actually understand that they're coming back as a construction project is actually being carried on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the demolition of the gardener, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for both of us, we were very much interested, again, getting as close as possible to nature, but showing that context and trying to find images that really kind of have that tension of, the natural world and, this man-made world. This could be on the spit. If anyone's familiar with Tommy Thompson, this could be a scene from there. And so that was really quite enjoyable. Flight Path. Should title this one Flight Path.
Yeah, who has priority here, right?
Yeah. The hawks have down on the site more recently have also become a fixture down there, and it's really great. A lot of the workers down there, they see us with the cameras. They know us. They're always saying, "Oh, have you seen the hawks? They're over here. They're on this side of the site today." And we have a lucky one on the far right here. This hawk has found their lunch for the day.
Yeah.
Let me go back. Sorry.
There's the rabbit. Yeah. So the other theme that we wanted to touch on of the many, again, as Ryan said, was the representation of labor on a contemporary construction site, and I'm violating some of the rules of PowerPoints here by putting too much text on. I know, but I wanted to. Just note what Vince Pietropalo said when he did his book Canadians at Work in 2000. He toured Canada photographing various sites of labor, but he made the point in his book that you so rarely see sites of labor, even represented by people who work on the sites. Although I know that people have their cell phones on the site, but of course there are rules about what you can post and where you can post these days. So the whole question of representing, labor is a really interesting one these days. So we really felt that it was important to try to show who works on these sites, how they interact with one another, and then also, the fact that we're there for 4 or 5 years, we have a chance to build relationships with people over time. And we're recognized now. We're not safety people coming down to try and catch them, not wearing their PPE properly or something. They start to interact with us as well, and they wave to us, and we have a really interesting ongoing relationship with many of the workers, and workers are rotating in and out of this site constantly.
Yeah, I think to build off of that, as documentary photographers, and we're working on long-term bodies of work. This kind of question of access and transparency and developing these relationships with folks on site. The early days of the project, Vid and I walking around with our cameras, folks were maybe kind of weary, like, oh, are they part of the safety team? Are they here to bust us, or what are our intentions? And I think very early on we communicated to folks, especially when we're engaged with portraits. We have a conversation, we exchange contact information, we get their names, email, often send them a copy of the image, and I think it's been really fascinating. And folks, we really get a sense that folks take pride in the work they're doing down there. And feel that they want to share these images with their family, with their friends. Again, kind of going back to Pietropalo's quote there, dealing with the representation of labor and documentation of that. It's not common, so people really do take pride in sharing these images with their friends and family.
Yeah, the diversity on the site is actually very impressive as well. Teomira has been there for 30 years. 30 years. And she's been give her a hand.
She's incredible. Yeah.
Teomira.
Every day too.
Yeah.
Every day.
And the folks at Ellis Dawn have adopted her, sort of, and they've built her a new places to set up her cart every few months when the construction takes over her site. So
she's moved numerous times due to the construction project. We're not only, as well with labor, we're not necessarily interested in just depicting, what people are doing, but we're also very much drawn to the way in which people socialize and kind of communicate and interact with one another on a work site like this.
Mm-hmm.
COVID.
Yeah, that's
enough said.
Yeah. So it's a very small selection of what we have. Our archive is, it's frightening.
Here's the falconry, the falconry handler. You don't see that every day on the site. That was exciting.
Yeah, and this is an image. We had an idea at one point of photographing construction helmets, because in truth they're autobiographical. They have stickers on them, not only of all the sites they've worked on, but also they sometimes make political statements. You might see a few things in there that are a little dubious, but they make comments through their helmets, because otherwise all the other gear they're wearing, of course, is the same. Right, everyone wears the same PPE, that sort of thing. The helmet is the one place where people can express themselves. So we really love to somehow do something more focused and even more perhaps formal to do with these. Manual labor.
And again, some of the narrative arc over time as well, how labor shifted in the project from the heavy machinery to the hand planting, more of an agrarian approach at certain chapters and stages of the project. Again, that social interaction.
And this is the our Tim Hortons product placement shot.
Could sponsor this thing by.
I would say
Tim
that
Hortons could sponsor this.
I would say that Tim Hortons should be approached as a sponsor. Yeah, and this is the last shot that we're showing from this series, and it is the final inspection of the river valley to determine whether it was ready for inundation. And this happened just literally a week ago, 2 weeks ago. January 10th, I believe it was. And then we wanted to return to the question of documentation here at the end now, and if we go on, there's a statement I also again violated all PowerPoint rules on by including too much text, but it's a quote from David Campany, who was a really well-respected photo historian, and he actually curated an exhibition and a book project for Aperture magazine, and he talked about the fact that that you hardly ever really see extensive depictions of labor and sites of labor in mass media anymore, and that because there's such an image consciousness about what could happen if something gets shown that we don't like, or there's an enormous amount of restriction around one of the most ubiquitous scenes we see, especially in Toronto. Toronto is filled with sites of labor. Obviously, there's condos going up everywhere, but you can't walk onto that site and make any photographs. So this is another, for us, an indication of really what we think is quite a visionary decision on the part of Waterfront Toronto to let these two guys loose on their site for 5 years.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And we wanted to harken back to actually one time in the past when Toronto did something equally interesting around one of the other sites. And this is related because it's the Don Valley, of course. This is the Bloor Viaduct being constructed. And Arthur Goss, who worked for the city for many, many years, he was the first photographer officially to work for the city. And he worked with a large format view camera. And he made an amazing series of almost 800 photographs of the construction of the Bloor Viaduct. And so we often see ourselves, humbly following in the footsteps of Mr. Goss. And to go to speak about why is this documentation of value. Perhaps the next slide. Michael Ondaatje, of course, wrote the book In the Skin of the Lion based on his archival research. He went to the archives, he looked at these photographs by Arthur Goss, and he created characters, from what he saw in the archives photo documents. So there is a kind of there's a legacy created. We don't know how our photographs are going to be seen in 50 years. We don't even know what people will see in our photographs. And the same thing happens with Arthur Goss's photographs. The things that we're interested in now are not necessarily the things that Torontonians were interested in seeing in those photographs back in 1915 or 1916. So there's a kind of a kind of projection into the future that's always going on in any kind of documentary project, and especially in one of this magnitude. I think we have a lot of photographs, and I'm sure that quite a few of them will end up in the City of Toronto archives at some point for people to research. So we feel it's very important for us to advocate for others to perhaps commission artists and photographers to do projects like this. And this is us projected into the future.
This was our first day on the commission. This was a meeting at City Hall to go over plans, and we had started, and we stand in the green screen. We wanted to be down on the site, so we're going to end with that, the formal portion, with that image, and we've included some links as well related, but yeah, thank you.